Hi, welcome to another episode of the Carolyn Glick Mideast News Hour. I'm joined once again by co-host Gadi Taub. Hey, Gadi.
Hello from Tel Aviv.
Hey, so today we're going to be talking about the coalition agreements and the coalition government that Israel's about to see formed, and it's due to be sworn in sometime in the next several days. We're recording this on Tuesday morning. But we're just going to be talking about the form that the new coalition government is taking, what it's all about, and what it means for Israel going forward, both internally inside of Israel and Israel's sovereignty, and also externally, and what it means for our relations with the nations of the region and with the United States. And we'll just do a spoiler alert real quick. It's all bad news. So, right, Gadi? I mean, is there anything good that we want to talk about, or is it all lousy?
The only thing I can think about is we can go on offense now and stop playing defense. That would be a great relief.
There you go. There you go. So it's true. One of the nice things about being in the opposition is that you can you basically take your gloves off, and you don't have to defend something that you don't like, but it's what happens when you have to make compromises in office. That's what politics is all about. It's the art of the possible. It's doing the best you possibly can with the cards that you've drawn from the deck.
Caroline, in order for you to take your gloves off, you've got to put them on sometime.
Oh, you mean I'm not a coalition player? All right.
Yeah,
well,
no, you're one of the sharpest commentators here. That's why I love this show.
Oh, well, that's why I love you too, Gadi. That's why we're in it together, right? Because neither of us pull our punches.
Yeah, Ken. Yeah.
But now we're gonna be going at that punching bag, and we're gonna be bludgeoning it. Oh, but we're not allowed to say that, because that's one of the great things about our new government is that they haven't even formed yet. They haven't even been sworn in, and they're already saying that everybody who opposes them is inciting violence and should come under police investigation, immediately, right? Because opposing the Sweetness and Light coalition that's now being formed is a criminal act, which, by the way, we shouldn't be surprised by, because look at what Prime Minister Netanyahu has been indicted for. He's been indicted for basically being a politician, right? That's his crime.
And for all the time that they were in the opposition, the clock always said 1933, and it was always the rise of Nazism. Now the clock will always say January 6th, right? Because anything we do is going to be an attack on Capitol Hill.
An insurrection.
An insurrection. I actually argued with someone who is an editor of foreign news, who said that, I think it was the 7th of January, he said, "What are you talking about?" He told me, "This is a Nazi insurrection. A Nazi insurrection. No less. This is the burning of the Reichstag." Unbelievable proportions.
Well, the truth is that you have hundreds of American citizens, loyal, law-abiding American citizens, who are now rotting in jail, facing 20 years in prison for trespassing.
Yeah. So these wonderful winds are coming to our country as well, and anything now is incitement. Especially, you can't say traitors, right? So I picked something from Haaretz, a former colleague of mine, who, when Benny Gantz, in one of the last rounds, when Benny Gantz moved from the anti-Bibi bloc to form this government that we have now with Bibi, the headline said, "Yes, Drucker," it's the name of another journalist. "Yes, Drucker, they are traitors." So just remember, what the left is allowed to do, the right is never allowed to do.
Well, that's right. So I was on a radio program on Friday morning, and I said that it was in Hebrew, but I said that Naftali Bennett, who's going to be our prime minister, except he's going to be a scarecrow prime minister. I mean, he has no power. We're going to get into that in just a second, but we just have to let off steam. We're ventilating here at the beginning of our broadcast, and then we're going to get really serious, because we're pretty freaked out and frustrated and upset. So we're just going to share that with you, our viewers and listeners, for just 1 second. Then we promise, right, Gadi? We promise that we're going to give you intelligent analysis of everything. But I'm giving this radio interview, and I said in Hebrew that Naftali is treacherous, that he committed treachery or treason. It's the same word in Hebrew, right? And so the interviewer said, "Oh, last time that right wingers used that term, it ended up with 3 bullets in the prime minister in Tel Aviv." And I said, "Oh, I see." I said, "Well, here, I have a request for you. Please, can you publish in one of the newspapers a list of all of the words that right-wingers are no longer able to say so that we know and we can launder over our vocabulary appropriately? But we need to know. So please just put out that list as quickly as possible so we'll know what the new rules are under the new regime." And he said, "Oh, I don't have the authority to do that." And I said, "I think you do." I said, "So just do us all a favor."
Yeah, the media kangaroo court. Yeah.
Right. So please just let us know what the new rules are, because really, just so you understand, the news in Israel has really been dominated by this fake discourse about incitement. And that's how we know that everything is starting, and everything is what we're going to get into in a second. But everything is starting because first thing that you have to do is bar anybody from criticizing what you're about to do by delegitimizing your opponents. Until you do that, you can't really move forward. So right now, before this government has even been sworn in, the media and the politicians, Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid, and all of their comrades in arms are all. Gidon Saar gave an impassioned statement against incitement yesterday. They're all going to the mattresses to delegitimize all of their opponents and say everybody who they stood with, the day before yesterday, in the case of Naftali Bennett and Gidon Saar, and never in the case of Yair Lapid, all of them are enemies of the people, and they're dangerous, and you mustn't listen to any of us because that's just the way it. In fact, they have blacklists already being put out on Twitter by left-wing activists with names of media organizations and prominent journalists. You're on it. I'm not. Haha.
You're not. I think you're on Barak's list. I think you are.
I didn't see me. Well, I don't know. I was actually hurt, but all right. I mean, they said all of my newspaper, Israel Hayom. So I thought, well, maybe I'm included there. But anyway, so they have a list of names. They've named
to be included like in a group. No,
I was really upset.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, because you have been one of the leading prominent right-wing voices for. How I remember being scared of you, Caroline, when I was
when you were left. By the way,
that dangerous woman. Ah, yeah.
Yes, I know. I'm fire breathing. Anyway, don't mess with Texas. I was born in Houston. You know that. Don't mess with Carolyn Glick. But no, but we. By the way, we know viewers, listeners. We've gotten requests from a number of you for Gadi to tell his personal story of how he moved from the left to the right.
Oh.
But right now, we just have a lot of people that we have to attack before it's made illegal. So we'll talk about Gadi and his journey, after we've been barred. Well, after we've been barred by new law from saying anything that's actually important, and I mean this is of course very important, but to you, to us, it's all important. We want to know you, Gadi. It's important to know the real.
We learn to speak in allegories, right?
Yes, exactly. We're going to put together a whole new way of explaining things. Metaphorically, everything's going to be done by metaphors.
I have a very interesting story about the ugly duckling who stopped being a leftist, but that's for another time.
Another time. But that's after we've actually been barred from saying anything. So let's use this coming hour to discuss, now that we've ventilated, right? let's go into the nitty gritty. So what do you want to start with first? You want to start with the with what they're doing to Netanyahu, or you want to start with what they're doing to sovereignty? What do you think?
I think we have to start with the fact that it's become completely postmodern. That what they did to politics now, and it's been happening not just here. These are the wins. We see the same thing with the role of the media in America. We see a surrender to the idea that there is only narrative and that facts could be completely erased. This is the Ben Rod's worldview. And these people now people are saying, since I'm arguing on Twitter, I don't know that it's a good thing in the long run, these Twitter arguments, but I'm arguing with and Naftali Bennett has cold-bloodedly has taken right-wing voters and made them the bedrock of a left-wing coalition by telling them a lie, by telling them that this is what he would not do. And the fact that you can get away with this is the most striking thing. And what these people say when you argue with them on Twitter is, but Bibi. Did you notice, Caroline? Everything they answer starts with, but Bibi. So supposedly Bibi is this great liar. I don't know that Bibi is a liar. I don't think he is, though he maneuvers like any politicians, but always in the service of his voters. Naftali Bennett just completely turned his back on his own voters who will not vote for him again. He just took their votes and moved them to the exact opposite of what he promised to do. But he can get away with this now, and by saying Aval Bibi. So there are no standards. And since they demonized Bibi in this topsy-turvy, crazy discourse that the media is imposing on us, since Bibi is the demon, everything is permitted. I don't know that this is an argument. This is just a sentiment, right? It's a metaphor. Since Bibi is the great devil, then there are no rules anymore because he already did it. Now,
it's not just that. I mean, part of it is that. Part of it is the utter shamelessness and the sort of continuous insult to our intelligence, right? Because Naftali gave an interview to Amit Segal, who's sort of the big honcho political commentator on Channel 12, which has monopoly share of the primetime news market here. So he gives this interview to Amit Segal, and he acknowledges that he completely misled all of his voters about everything that he was going to do. But he made a distinction between regular promises and, like, I don't know what you call them. Core promises. So there are regular promises and there are core promises. Now, what are the regular promises? I'm on the right. I will never leave the right. I will never be in a coalition with Yair Lapid. I will never form a government with him with rotating premierships. I will never join a coalition with left-wing parties. Just one
footnote, Karen. He actually signed a paper on live TV showing it to the camera that he would never, under any condition, form a government with Yair Lapid. He actually did this while knowing that this is a deception.
The whole thing is a lie. I will never negotiate with the Islamist party Ra'am, the United Arab List. I will never do any of these things. He called these, in his interview, regular promises. What was his core promise? His core promise is, I will not permit fifth elections. Okay? So everything that people actually cared about when they went to vote for him, those are just regular promises. Now, that would be bad enough. That would be bad enough, right? He said, I am a liar. I am a pathological liar. The only thing that you can believe that I say are stuff that's in my own personal interest. Everything that's in the public interest, I just lied. I lied completely. I lied 100%, but it's not a big deal because those are just regular promises. The core promises for him, a core promise is just a promise that relates to him personally, because he knew that all of these regular lies that he told were going to ensure that if there are fifth elections, he won't get reelected. So for him, blocking fifth elections is the only thing that's important because that's the only thing that relates specifically to him. And everything else just relates to the country. And who cares? But that's just one aspect. That would be terrible enough. That would go down in history as the most unbelievable statement ever made by a politician in Israel and arguably in any democracy. But then he carried on the next day. He gave a speech that all three channels carried and, it live because he is the incoming prime minister and we all have to care about what he says.
No fact checking. The fact checking is only for Netanyahu.
No, right. And so he says, and this is what we're going to talk about next, is what he's done with the Islamist party Ra'am. And we're going to talk a little bit about them. But he says, Netanyahu is lying when he says that I'm doing something that he never did. He's a liar. He's a big fat liar. I'm telling the truth. I always tell the truth. I love this country. You're my people. I'm your leader. Netanyahu is mean and corrupt and a liar, pants on fire. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking to myself, you don't care. You literally just told us yesterday that you are the biggest liar in the history of Israeli politics, and now you're telling us that we should believe you because Netanyahu is a liar. And that to me was so striking, right? Because it's the utter shamelessness of it all. And you're talking about postmodernism, and it's true that nothing is related to anything. There's no context. There's no past. There's no yesterday, right? There's no tomorrow. There are going to be no consequences to anything that they do because everything is sweetness and light. And anybody who says any differently is inciting violence. He's an insurrectionist. He's January 6th, the Capitol Hill riots. He's Trump, so all of this stuff, like they're making it so that everything is of the moment. And of course, the media is going with him because like you said, this, but Bibi thing, but Bibi didn't do this, but Bibi didn't do that. It's a way to dumb down the discourse to the level of, Down syndrome, because what they're saying here, because they refuse to see the distinction between normal political wrangling, which involves trading horses, which involves making deals, which involves making the best of a very imperfect situation. In Israel, it involves having very little governing power, because most of the governing power is in the hands of an ultra-radical legal establishment that blocks almost every government initiative that involves applying Israeli sovereignty towards Israeli Arabs. And we're going to get into this in a second. They said, well, Bibi did this. And so the idea is to hide the actual problem from the public, which is the legal fraternity, blame Netanyahu for all of his failures, say that he already did what you're actually doing when he did no such thing. Bibi had to make do with an imperfect situation, and he never gave up on any principles. That is, there was never any question that of his commitment to Israeli sovereignty over all of Israel's sovereign territory, and also to large swaths of Judea and Samaria. Here, what they're doing is they're giving it up. They're conceding all of these things at the outset, and then saying there's nothing different between what we've just done and what Netanyahu has done for the past 10 years, when there's actually no similarity whatsoever between what they're doing and what's been going on for the past decade. But if you mention that again, you're cut off, because it takes you more than 30 seconds or 5 words actually of a soundbite to make the point. So you can't make the point in a news program. They cut you off. They don't let you. 3 leftist commentators who pretend to be objective interrupt you. They don't let you talk. All they say over and over and over again is the same lie, right? And you're stuck with a discourse that's based on no context, no past, no future, and no truth, and no shame. And so that's really where that's sort of the path that they're embarking on. And anybody who doesn't join them in this path, Ehud Barak, the former premier, said that anybody who opposes this, anybody who continues to support Netanyahu after this government is formed, you better be careful. You've been warned. You're going to get in trouble. That's what he wrote on Twitter yesterday. So they're threatening us. Of course, not me. My name wasn't on the list, but they're threatening you.
Oh, they don't mean you. No,
they don't mean
me.
No, they don't mean me. No, but
it's amazing the immunity that someone like Ehud Barak has. He's been photographed outside of Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. There was actually Erel Segal and I did this on. There was no follow up. We did this on the radio. The neighbors at a building up on the east side where Jeffrey Epstein housed his hostage minor models, the neighbors complained that Barak used to come and stay there. They complained because his security detail was creating a nuisance in the lobby, and nobody picked this up here. You know, all the feminists who are still hounding Chaim Ramon for having kissed someone. There's complete silence because this symbiosis between the marginal but manipulative left-wing parties, the judiciary, which is the real government in Israel, which is almost completely on the radical left, its enforcement arm, which is the Attorney General and the Yoetz HaMishpati, the legal counsel to the government,
the Attorney General,
and the press. And so this cooperation between these people, they have completely demonized Netanyahu over the indictments, which are ridiculous. But people who don't know anything, and I speak to these people often, they just don't, completely innocent, are convinced that Netanyahu is a traitor to the country. He is the devil incarnate. And what is most striking, that Israel is in a terrible shape. Israel is in the best shape it was ever. The Economist listed the 10 strongest countries in the world. We are number 8, and people are
and
walking
they're not
around
known
Tel Aviv
for being a pro-Israel magazine. To the contrary,
not at all. And people and the standard of living here is amazing, and we have emerged unscathed from the collapse in 2008, and now from the corona. We are the first state to emerge from the, and people are walking in Tel Aviv like they're moonstruck, and that Israel is in total collapse because of Netanyahu. It's like and you see the power of a corrupt media. It's just like they've managed to completely blot out reality, and so Ehud Barak feels completely immune. And he's been under investigations and was not indicted. He is considered.
And so, by the way, was Bougie Herzog, who has now been elected overwhelmingly the next president of Israel, and he's actually, I think, part of this whole thing.
Because again, it's not just that the left can say what the right cannot. The left can get away with murder or close to it, and not be investigated. And the right and people on the right, there is now a history of, how would you say, Caroline, tfirat tikim?
Yeah, I mean, it's called sowing indictments, but it's not that. It's manufacturing crimes. I mean, there's no what happened with Netanyahu. Just to be very clear, he's being indicted for bribery, for bribery and for accepting bribes. Now, what was the bribe? The bribe is that he asked for and received positive coverage from a minor news site called Walla that was owned by a guy who owns a big telecommunications firm in Israel called Bezek. And so they claim that Netanyahu received positive coverage from this website.
Which is not true. It's not true.
I was going to get into that. But forgetting for a second, just assuming for a second that he got positive coverage, under the statute of bribery in Israel, that is not a form of bribe. That a bribe is not positive coverage. There's no connection, because if you say that positive news coverage is a bribe, right, then you're criminalizing journalism. Because then anytime that I say something positive about a politician, I can find myself under criminal investigation. What did you get in exchange for that? What did your newspaper get in exchange for that? What kind of connection do you have with this politician? So, first
by the way,
of all,
same if you criticize someone, because that would be on
yes.
the flip side of the same thing. Why are you criticizing him and not him?
Right. So because what this does, the concept of it is it exists in no statute of bribery in any democracy. I don't know whether it existed in the Soviet Union, but it certainly doesn't exist in any democratic rule of law. So that's what we're facing now, right? So he was indicted for this. And of course, as Gadi said, the absurd thing is that he never received any good coverage from this website. And on the other hand, a lot of leftist politicians, including, by the way, Herzog, who's now our president-elect, received awesome coverage from them in direct communication with the CEO of this website. And so this was all, it was all a lie. The whole thing was a lie. He got no positive coverage. Oh, and he wasn't involved at all in the regulatory process. So that involved this telecommunications company. So the whole thing is a lie. They criminalized a non-criminal act. Now, why did they do this? Because Netanyahu didn't commit any crimes. So the only way that he could be indicted for anything was by claiming that the actions that he did commit are crimes. So they redefined statutes, accepting gifts in excess of what's permitted under Israeli law. That's another thing that he's being indicted, that he's under indictment for. But that's an arbitrary determination to say that, he could have gotten 2 bottles of champagne, but he can't get 20 bottles of champagne. Well, that's an arbitrary determination by an attorney general. It puts arbitrary power in the hands of an unelected official, and that's in itself an abrogation of the rule of law. You have to have one law for everybody. So he's taking an amorphous statute to use it against one person that he didn't use it against another person. And that is also illegal because that is selective enforcement of the law. You're not allowed to do that either. So the whole thing is basically taking actions that Netanyahu actually did. Right? He did want to get better coverage for himself and for his family from this website. Just like he does in every newspaper, just like every politician does in every newspaper, right? And in every media organization. That's their bread and butter. So he engaged in normal politics. They took actions that he did indisputably. They said that this was criminal. Only specifically about Netanyahu. We're going to get into this in a second in the law that they're proposing passing in this new coalition government that are also specifically against Netanyahu. We've never had anything like this. So we have indictments that are built, built to fit, just one person, right? Netanyahu, that are involving criminalizing normal political activities, but only for Netanyahu. And now we're going to get new laws that are only for Netanyahu. And so this is who we're up against. They stop at nothing. They have no shame. They lie and they don't care. And they take a situation, distort it, to blame Netanyahu for it, and to hide the people that are actually responsible for it. Then they make it worse, and they blame Netanyahu for that as well.
But
so this is sort of the loop that we're in.
The irony of it all is that Netanyahu has gotten, the press has been hounding Netanyahu almost to the extent that the American press has been hounding Donald Trump. And in the end, he is indicted for inviting positive coverage. This man has been, like, the press has been demonizing him to an extreme extent, and
since the 1990s.
And he made one step to try and counter this, and immediately it's like their collective subconscious is just projecting. They've been lying about him all the time, and the minute he tries to defend himself, and this has been happening. This is people who have tried to invest in trying to create, let's say, an Israeli Fox channel, found themselves interviewed by the police. So that any attempt by the right to create right-wing outlets is the left and the judiciary are moving to criminalize that. So think of how the American media is relatively pluralistic relative to our scene. But anything that so imagine that Netanyahu, as minister, he was also holding the portfolio of communications, would have tried to give a license to an Israeli Fox News. They would have immediately considered this a bribe and immediately made it a crime. So we are being held under the grip of a very, very corrupt system who is trying to block all avenues for right-wing thought, not just for right-wing expression. And what is amazing,
or politics,
and of course politics, but there's like a hierarchy from ideas to ideology to political day to day, and all this. And regardless of all this, we are still winning the war of ideas because the left is completely bereft of argument. It's just amazing.
That it's important. I agree, but I really want to get in, because last week we didn't talk about it because we didn't know yet about what Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid and Gideon Sa'ar are agreeing to do in respect to Ra'am, the Islamist party. And here I just want to preface. You say, "Oh, Carolyn, you were for talking to this part of the United Arab List," and that's absolutely true. I was, but I think that had I been presented, in fact, I know that if I had been presented with a list of demands that Ra'am, this party, presented to them, I would have said, "Okay, great. Have a great day. Thank you. No, thank you. There is literally no way that any responsible leader should ever even consider agreeing to this. My view, and I still hold to it. I still hold to it, is that, there are two possibilities in Israel's dealings with the Arab world, and the Israeli Arabs and the Palestinian Arabs, and they are these. Either Israel can command respect, or it can beggar contempt. Those are the two possibilities. And if Israel commands respect, to my mind, just as we see articulated in the Abraham Accords, we can reach a stable, meaningful coexistence with our Arab neighbors that work to the benefit of both, but they're predicated first and foremost on an acceptance of Israel as a Jewish state and our right to sovereignty in our country. All right. And if that's accepted, then, everything's possible. If that's rejected, which is what's happened with the Palestinians, and to a degree, what's also happened with the Jordanians and what happened until Sisi with the Egyptians, then, we don't have a real peace. We have a paper peace. And the paper peace is actually working to Israel's detriment because we're misled, and the legitimacy that we've given, particularly to the Palestinians, and the money and the land and the arms that they've received as a consequence of their peace deals with Israel that are based on a non-acceptance of Israel as a Jewish state, all work to further their efforts to annihilate Israel politically, militarily, from a terrorist perspective, from a land perspective, from a financial perspective with the BDS, and so on and so forth. So everything is possible if it's based upon an acceptance of who we are. And the only possibility and the only prospect is instability, weakening of Israel, harming Israel, and in the case of the Palestinians, constant drumbeat of hatred, incitement, punctuated by mass campaigns of terrorism. So with the Ra'am party, when they said that they were willing to come in and discuss various collaborative agreements with Likud or with the left, I said, out of idealism and belief, that it's possible that we can reach a stable equilibrium with the Israeli Arabs, just as we did with the Gulf states, that is based, again, on an acceptance of true recognition of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state and the permanence of the Jewish state as a feature in our region, then fine, let's talk and see what they have to offer. But we see with Ra'am's demands that have been met by Bennett and by Lapid, is that that's not how they came to the table. Or perhaps they would have come to the table if somebody had commanded respect and commanded recommendation and demanded recognition. But what we find is that Lapid, Bennett, Saar, and the rest of their cronies did not. To the contrary, they treated Ra'am the same way that Rabin and Peres and Barak treated Arafat. That is, they don't expect him to do anything except demand the erosion of the sovereignty of the Jewish state, and they agreed to it. So that's what's so stunning. And according to the coalition agreements that have already been published, right, what they've done and how this is coming about is that they have agreed to freeze the enforcement of Israel's building and zoning laws towards Arab Israelis, okay, in the entire country. They have agreed to stop issuing fines against illegal Arab building throughout the country. They have agreed to freeze the destruction of illegal structures for which there is a destruction order out from the courts. After it's been brought to the courts, it's been adjudicated, and the courts have found that the state is correct and these illegal structures should be destroyed. And just to be clear, that when I talk about the failure of Netanyahu in governing Israel for the past decade as a result of the radicalization of the legal system, so every time that the government tried to enforce building and planning zones, particularly in the Negev, which we'll get to in a second, the police, if they did anything, they would try to arrest the people who are doing it. And then the legal, either the attorneys and the prosecutors would refuse to indict them, or even if they indicted them, the courts would release them. And then they would come and they would kill the people, or destroy the building equipment of the people who complained against them in the first place. So there was no enforcement of the laws, not as a result of government decision, but as a result of the malfeasance of Israel's judiciary at the local level, at the magistrates court level, at the district courts level, at the Supreme Court level, and of the prosecution in the south, in the north, and in the center of the country in relation to Arab illegal buildings. So that,
and despite that, in 2020 there's been a 13% increase in enforcing the laws against illegal building. So, and this is according to human rights organizations who have been complaining that the law is being enforced. So that these people, when they say now, but Netanyahu didn't do anything, this has become the catchword for whatever you want, whatever crime you want to do, you just say, but Netanyahu. So what they're doing is Netanyahu didn't do enough, but he did something. They are going to just hand this over to Ra'am. And Ra'am's constituency are exactly those people in the Negev, the Bedouins, who are taking over. It's like, it's the Wild West. It's the frontier of Palestine. They're just taking over by physically erecting illegal structures on
government land.
On government land, yeah. And everyone's retreating. The police is retreating, and there was these absurd scenes in which they stole weapons from IDF bases, and the IDF feels its hands are tied because it's scared of the judiciary. So,
and it's not just that; they're actually building illegal communities in fire zones in the IDF training bases in the Negev. So imagine it's a national security threat against Israel in the sense that it constrains our forces' ability to train for war. Because not only are they stealing the weapons, including, some really serious missile systems, shoulder fired missiles. They've been stealing Lao missiles. These are big deals. Or Tau missiles, sorry, and they're stealing them, and they're building illegal communities on bases, in fire zones, inside of the live fire zones, inside of training bases in the Negev. And if you come to visit Israel and you drive from the center of country down to Eilat for vacation, and you go down through Beersheba, you see that there are these communities on either side of the highway. I mean, you don't have to go looking for them. They're all over, and they're changing the landscape of the Negev. And then that was the other thing. So one of the ways that Israel was able in recent years to increase enforcement of the laws, despite the legal fraternity, is that the Knesset, it took a long time, but they passed a law, which is dubbed the Kamenetz Law, which gave additional tools to law enforcement. And I think it also decreased the freedom of the legal fraternity to decide punishments for a lot of these people, so that they were compelled to enforce the law by the Knesset. They gave minimal punishments and so on and so forth for these breaches, and minimal fines. And that the idea was to take away the judgment, the freedom of operation of these radical jurists. So the question was, what was going to happen to the Kamenetz Law? And what's happening to the Kamenetz Law is that it's being frozen. It's not going to be enforced. And the other thing that's happening is that all of these illegal settlements by Bedouin in the Negev that are undermining Israel's sovereignty are going to be recognized. So they said in the first instance, 3 of them, which in a way it's not that big of a deal. It's sort of in the consensus. The Netanyahu government had agreed to recognize 3 of these illegal communities and grant them official status in Israel, which I think is not great, but okay. I don't know. Wasn't involved in the discussions. I certainly haven't been following the story. But that's one thing. So, Netanyahu was doing that. Yeah, but then there's more, right?
The eternal argument.
Right, but then they're going on from there. They're saying that there are, a dozen other of these communities that are going to be discussed in a committee, right? Which means that they're going to be approved. And then the last thing that's been published, but there are other things that haven't been published, but they've been acknowledged. So the other thing that's been published is that they're giving Ra'am a slush fund, the likes of which no ultra-Orthodox party that, everybody accuses them of being corrupt. They've never seen anything like that. They're getting a slush fund of a half billion shekels, no strings attached, to use as they like. Imagine that. You're giving a Muslim Brotherhood aligned party, right, a slush fund of a $500 million shekels. How much is that in dollars? It's about $100 million, $150 million to use as they like over the next 4 years. It's $1 million a day it works out to. What are they going to do with that?
And just to add two more facts. One is polygamy among the Bedouins. They have been importing wives from the territory. So this has been,
and also from Sinai.
And so this has been like a road to bypass Israeli immigration laws and enlarge the population hugely. There are Bedouins with hundreds of children and hundreds of grandchildren, because and this is a horrible thing to these women, and this is probably the most downtrodden sector of Israeli society, is the Bedouin women who live under polygamy. And of course the progressive feminist left has been absolutely silent about this. The only thing that I've heard was this woman worked in an office near mine at Hebrew University who blamed Zionism for polygamy. So the only way they can fit this horror into their progressive worldview, in which Zionism is supposed to be guilty of everything, is this way. And it's a crime of the state of Israel that it did not impose its laws against polygamy. It's against the national interest, but primarily it's about human rights. These women are just, I've visited some of these communities, and you see what actually happens. You see what happens is the wife, when she gets a little old and she's not that attractive anymore to the husband, she's relegated to some shack at the end of a land that has been taken over, and she and her children become second, third, fourth, seventh tier family members in their extended family. So it's horrible. And the second thing I wanted to say, it's a sad joke that I saw someone put on Twitter.
Before you go on to the second thing, one of the things that has been acknowledged but not published is that Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid have given oral acceptance of ending the law barring what's called family unification, so that the one thing that has blocked this demographic time bomb from detonating that you're describing, of bringing in women from Gaza and from the Sinai and from Judea and Samaria and marrying them to Israeli Arab citizens, is that in 2002, Israel blocked them from receiving Israeli citizenship. And so what they're saying now is that they're going to enable them to get Israeli citizenship. So then this is just, tens of thousands more people that are going to be on the voter rolls that have no relationship to this country.
Yeah, and
what's the second thing?
And I think we should be moving to the personalized laws.
But what was the second thing that you were going to say?
The second thing was a joke I saw on Twitter, which was sad and funny at the same time, is that the Jewish parties have managed to extract a concession from Ra'am, which will promise Jews a safe corridor through the Negev if they want to go on vacation to Eilat. So these are the sort of jokes that are going on now in Twitter, that Jews would need permission to cross the Negev on their way to a vacation in that.
So really before we go to Netanyahu, because I think that is the core aspect of this government that has to be discussed aside from this, I think that, the implication of the agreements that they have signed with Ra'am, are legion. But the most important one is that it is, more than anything else. I mean, they're going to do things with conversion law and with the state rabbinical courts and all sorts of things that are going to be just diabolical for Israel's ability to remain a Jewish state. But if you put that aside completely, the internal Jewish issues, the religious Jewish issues of this government, or the anti-religious aspects of this government, and you just look at what they've agreed to with the Negev, this is a post-Zionist to anti-Zionist government. This is a government that is reneging on Israel's sovereignty in the largest area of the country, in the Negev. They are renouncing it. Like you said, this safe corridor, black humor jokes, the macabre jokes, is actually true. I mean, if they say that we are not going to enforce the law at all towards Israeli Arabs, then what they're saying is that we're not sovereign anymore. This is not a country anymore. If you're only going to enforce the laws towards certain parts of your country, and the rest get to do what they want, and they have 500 million shekels to do whatever they want, then you're saying I'm no longer a sovereign country. I'm no longer a Jewish state, and I'm no longer a sovereign state, because inside of my own sovereign borders, I'm not going to do anything. And so I think, that is the implication of what they've agreed to. No less. This is an abrogation of Israeli sovereignty. And having said that, with that happy, in that happy note, let's move on to what they're doing to Bibi.
Yeah, just when I can't help myself but comment on this, because I saw Limor Samimian, who's a very smart commentator, say this. The settlers, the religious settlers who follow Naftali Bennett have displaced the Palestinian state to the poorer sectors of Israel. They will have their own settlements in Judea and Samaria, but they're creating a Palestinian state where it would only hurt the poorer, mostly Mizrahi Israelis of the kind that live in Beersheba.
Oh, no. Limor is wrong. She's totally wrong. This is just what's happening today. The day after tomorrow, all of these Naftali Bennett voters are going to see that the communities in Judea and Samaria, where I live and where another 500,000 Israelis live, are all going to be under threat, no less and likely more than what's happened in the Negev. And, we see this as well in Jerusalem. Where
that doesn't mean she's wrong. It's just their wrong calculation. They think that they're relegating the Palestinian state to the Negev. Judea and Samaria are next. It's very clear, because already we hear that portions of this coalition behind Naftali Bennett's back
of course, behind his back,
have been hinting to the American administration that we are again ready to discuss the two-state solution,
or saying it outright.
Yeah.
And so let's just go to Netanyahu, and then if we have time, which I doubt, we'll go to what they're doing with the Palestinians. So and Biden, our friend Joe Biden. Our buddy Biden. Anyway, so let's go to Netanyahu. What are they doing with Netanyahu? Why don't you start this one?
Yeah, they are trying to tailor a series of personalized laws, which are designed specifically to prohibit Netanyahu for competing for re-election again. And the rumors yesterday was that not only are they going to try for a law limiting the number of terms that a prime minister can serve, which is a crazy idea if your system of government is not a presidential one, because he's leading a party. You're basically telling the party that it can elect its own preferred officials. But they're also going to try and bar him from running to the Knesset. And part of this is the whole campaign.
No, they actually already put a bill before the Knesset on that, which is this is already, they're trying to move this forward already now. Yeah.
And the other part is the idea that you cannot run if you are indicted. Now, this is the law in this subject has been amended in 2001 by a huge majority comprising almost 3/4 of the Israeli Knesset, to say that a prime minister can keep serving until he is what do you say, mursha, until he is convicted, until he has a
final conviction,
in the last appeal. And right. Why is that? Because in Israel, unlike the more democratic system that the United States has, the Attorney General can decide almost on his own to indict a politician. And if you are forcing a politician to resign when he is indicted, this means that the Attorney General holds the power to remove an elected government. This is unheard of in democracies. We don't need to tell our American audience how complicated it is to remove a president. Here is our head of the executive, and a single public servant is going to hold the power to remove him. And unelected. Because here he's part of the civil service. It's not like in America where the president can appoint his own attorney general. So this is outrageous. And the reason they're doing it is because this whole bureaucracy belongs to the same left-leaning progressive elite, and it seeks to take the power to remove elected government because they have failed since 1977 almost always to win the ballot. So they have to bypass democracy, and this is what they're trying to do. And all this is couched in this moralistic discourse in which people say, but someone who is indicted, you would never hire a nanny who is under indictment. Of course I would not hire a nanny who's under indictment, but a nanny is not an elected official. This is, and nobody thinks the Attorney General is a tool to remove nannies. This is just completely hypocritical. What they are doing behind this facade of moralistic grandstanding is an attempt to take the power to remove the right wing from government by an unelected civil servant.
It's not just, I mean, yeah, obviously you're absolutely right. More power to you. Yeah, you got it, man. You got it, man. But no, but the thing here also is that what they're trying to do, they're trying to do two things. Remember when Trump, God bless Trump, when Trump was under attack, and they said he was working for Russia and Ukraine and whoever, and he had this meme or whatever out on Facebook, which is that they're going after me because I'm protecting you. So that, like, the idea was that I'm holding back the floodgates of this progressive tyranny, and if they get rid of me, they're coming after you, which of course we see with the hundreds of American citizens who are now rotting in jail for trespassing on Capitol Hill on January 6th. And we're seeing it with a critical race theory. And we're seeing it with, all of these different initiatives that the Democrats and the Biden administration are putting forward at the border, where they're opening it up to, anybody who wants to join. And then whatever. So we see that this was true. And with Netanyahu, it's the same way, because they view him as the American left viewed Trump, as the principal bar to their seizure of power over all things Israel related, whether it's Iran, the Palestinians, the legal fraternity, public discourse, our dealings with the United States, everything that they don't want to have done, sovereignty, all of these things, Netanyahu was blocking them from achieving by remaining in power. And when we look at the agreements that they've already signed with one another, we see that they were absolutely right, and that if they get rid of him, this is all going to collapse. But the other thing that's blocked it is Likud, the Likud party. The Likud party is basically, I mean, I don't want to wax, romantic about it. It's a party. It's a bare knuckles political party that advances a lot of people who are not my cup of tea, and a lot of people who are. But it's got its own internal pathologies. The thing of it is that it is an independent political force. It's a democratic party. Its leaders are chosen by members. It has hundreds of thousands of members who vote for the Central Committee. They vote for the Knesset list. And so you have an entity that is fully independent of all of these elites. And they keep electing Netanyahu. And so what they need in order to kind of cement their control over all aspects of Israeli society, they being these unelectable snot-nosed politicians who tell us that there's a difference between regular promises and core promises, when the regular promises are things we care about and the core promises are things that they care about, right? And so that's the difference. And so what they want to do is break up Likud. So not only are they saying that Netanyahu can never run again, right? He can't, I mean, he's going to be 76 in the next election. He's not going to run when he's 80, so what they're saying is that they want to ban him from politics completely, him personally. And they do this again, you said they wax moralistic, but they also Democrat. They said, oh, we need term limits. So we checked, me and my friend Avi Bell, we checked last night term limits in parliamentary democracies. So it works out that there are 4 democracies that impose term limits on prime minister: Cuba, China, Vietnam, and Thailand or Mongolia, all known for their advanced parliamentary democracies, right? Oh, and by the way, Mongolia itself is a presidential system. So no parliamentary democracy worth its snuff has any term limits on its prime ministers. But they say we need term limits. That's what you do in a democracy. This is another lie. But they also have things there that are geared towards busting up Likud as a political party. They want to change a law that makes it easier for Likud breakaway factions to leave the party and join this government. So I don't know whether we want to get into the weeds, but basically the law right now is you need 1/3 of a faction to break off in order to form an independent faction and join a government. And in the Likud's case, that would mean you need 10, which they're never going to get. So now they're dropping it. They're saying, no, you don't need 1/3. You only need 4. So what they're trying to do is prime the pump to get 4 of Gidon's friends to leave Likud and join this government. And everything is about breaking up Likud. And then the other thing is that if they pass this law, Netanyahu has already made clear that he's going to be the head of the opposition, and that what he's planning on doing if this government actually gets sworn in is have very quick leadership elections for Likud chairmanship, and then anybody who wants to join, including former Knesset speaker, and health minister Yuli Edelstein, or former Jerusalem mayor Nir Barkat. You told me before we started filming that Edelstein already threw his hat into the ring. Edelstein is. I always thought that he was part of this gang who wants to unseat Netanyahu. He could lose, and then if they pass the law with 4, he can join them. So the whole idea here is to destabilize and undermine and dismantle Likud as a political party. And so they're going after Netanyahu, but just like we saw with Trump, they're going Netanyahu to come after Israel. Not just to come after its voters, but as we see with the renunciation of sovereignty in the Negev and the renunciation of the power to enforce laws towards Israeli Arabs writ large, we're looking at a post-Zionist government. We're looking at a government that doesn't care about anything. Now, here I just want...
And they have an ideology. It's not just, you can't ascribe it all to meanness. Their North Star is a progressive view, and in the progressive view, the enemy of humanity is, of course, national identity. So at least the left-wing part of this coalition, and especially the Arab coalition, and certainly the Muslim Brotherhood, who are they're even against Palestinian nationalism. They are sort of pan-Islamists. They are pan-Islamists, and they see the little Jewish state as an invasion of the Muslim space. But the Israeli left-wing parties are very much like the radical progressive wing of the Democratic Party in America. The West is always to blame for everything. Nationalism is bad, and Jewish nationalism is just a laundered term for colonialism. So they actually welcome the dismantling of the national character of the state, which is why they fight tooth and nail for some 35,000 illegal African labor migrants in order to prevent the state from removing them, because the problem is not the migrants. The problem is the law of return, the national Jewish identity of the state, and this is what they're working to dismantle. Naftali Bennett, I don't think, even begins to understand this, because he sees only the surface of things. And this is, Caroline, I have to tell you something that I think has gone seriously wrong with the national religious sector of Israeli society, or at least with part of its elite, is that it has always tended to identify Israeli national identity with Judaism as a religion, and therefore it is not sensitive enough to the dismantling of a secular Jewish national identity.
I don't know that that's really what is true. I don't think that national religious Israelis only think of Judaism as a religious issue. I think that's I don't see that borne out in the actions. What I do see is, and I hate to use the term, but I see a childishness, a puerile character of the national religious community and everything that relates to politics. And I don't like to use the term childish because I expect more and I demand more, and I don't like to ascribe those kinds of characteristics. But there is this childishness of throwing tantrums when they don't get their way from their own people. That they brought down Shamir in 1992 because he went to the Madrid peace conference. And then they got Rabin, and they got the Oslo Agreement the next year, which was a disaster. They brought down Netanyahu in 1999 because he went to the Y Plantation conference with the PLO and agreed to certain things which were never implemented, but whatever. So they brought him down in 99, and then they got Ehud Barak, who gave up the Temple Mount and brought in the worst terrorism campaign that we've seen since the 1930s. They brought, in 2002, Netanyahu ran against Sharon in leadership primaries in the Likud. And the national religious sector went with Sharon because he was the cool guy, and not with Netanyahu, who was the irritating kid who eat paste in class, and then we got the expulsion from Gaza. So each time we see this behavior, which is massively self-destructive, they're angry at the left. They're angry at the right. They never are angry at the left. And they just make the same mistakes. They brought down the sovereignty agreement last year because they said they didn't get enough. And now they're facing a Muslim government involved, dominant government that is going to be a disaster. So I don't know that you can ascribe it to specific definitions of Judaism, but you can certainly ascribe it to political infancy. But anyway, we're over time.
I'll have more to say about that. So I was going to say that we should put this down for one of our next conversations because the religious Zionists are fascinating to me. I once wrote, by the way, an amazing book about this. You should absolutely. All
right, I have to read it so I can disagree with it heartily.
Okay, let's do that soon.
Anyway, all right. So thank you very much for tuning in. As you can see, this is a never-ending conversation, but we do want to let you, eat lunch. So we're gonna get off now, and we'll talk about this. We'll revisit all of these issues next week in another exciting episode of the Carolyn Glick Middle East News Hour with co-host Gadi Taub.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Exactly. That was my next thing. So last of all, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel or our Rumble channel or Apple iTunes podcast or FM Captivate podcast, then you really should, and share them with your friends, share them with your neighbors, share them with people that you hate and you just want to really irritate. Whatever you want, send it out. We need the truth to get out. You see that the discourse is just one lie wrapped in another, and being smothered by yet another one. And we just have to get the truth out because we're in a pickle and we got to figure out a way to get out of it. So
we are your feel-good conservative friends. Just tune into this and you'll become
so happy.
Optimistic
I'm
like
happy.
us.
Right? We're happy. Anyway, take care.
It was
Bye.
great. Thanks, Caroline. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.